Wes, what's up, buddy?
What's up, man?
How are you?
I'm doing pretty well. It's not quite as hot here as it is where you're at, but
Oh, you heard it was hot here?
It's
You
warm.
heard?
It's warm down there. Yeah, I've been following it, and I was like, man, it is kicking up. We're getting a lot of that heat is coming up and coming across kind of where we're at. So we're getting a bunch of the heat and some smoke from. I guess there's some fires down there. Is that right?
Down here too, yeah.
Yeah.
The whole West, man. It was. I shared a cool and interesting article the other day on the weather and like the heat, the whole heat aspect and how it is not normal. Like this isn't just another normal summer or normal phase of summers for the whole West, including Colorado. You know, the Rocky Mountains, everything really west of the Rocky Mountains. It's like we're in this like. Call it whatever it is, global warming, climate change, all of the above, you know, whether it's man-made, contributed, but the climate's changing, right? And it's getting hotter and hotter. You know, I grew up here in Arizona, and I've been talking a lot of other people that grew up here lately, especially last week. It was, I think we had early June, a full week straight of 117. For the high, and a couple of those days it broke records. I mean, it was 118 the other day. Like when I was younger, a teenager, it would get up into, I remember there was one day it was 122, but when it got to like 115, it was like big news, and it wasn't all the time. Where now it's like the entire month of June is 115. It's so crazy. It's just so hot. And it's like, is that just because it's getting hotter and hotter every year? Last summer we set so many records here in Phoenix. It was like the most 100-degree days, most 110, most 115-degree days, the longest summer ever. It was just crazy. It was, but this article went down into the science behind it, and studying, I don't know, these people that love weather and they just study this stuff, and I guess there's some type of like, almost like a heat dome or heat pocket that's being created or heat dome that I don't know. I didn't really understand a lot of it, but these things do happen, and they've happened here in the Valley and over the whole West. California has seen California is hotter than it's ever been. This last decade, it's just blazing hot. Where even on the coast, you just never ran into that, and now it's hot everywhere. There's fires everywhere all through the West, but they're saying that these long, extended heat domes, or whatever they're calling them, they're happening more frequently. Where they used to see them, like here in the Valley, you'd see one in like August, I think, if I remember the article correctly. But now it's like we're starting to see them in June. I think there's another one due here in a week or two where it's like excessive heat, like a 7 to 10 days long of just blaze, so. It was interesting, but it was like the whole point of the article is the whole West is seeing this. So it's just like this. And that's why there's so much extreme drought now, especially like in the wilderness areas in Arizona. Those are the ones that are suffering the most because there's so much timber. There's so much vegetation. It's not adapted to the desert environment. But that's climate change, It's like Arizona didn't look the way it was 10,000 years ago, and it's not going to look the way it is 10,000 years from now. Egypt used to be a tropical forest, and now it's just a barren desert. So it's like, these things come and go, but it's like we're living through this extreme, especially if you've lived here a long time. I've lived here for decades, and it's crazy, man. You get used to it, obviously, but it wears on you, and it's like it's just getting more and more excessive. It's like more and more hot. It's not a good place to be homeless or outside or, it's tough out here.
Yeah.
So, we're having a lot of heat. I mean, it's like we're right. I was telling you before the podcast, it's like if you plan on coming to visit Arizona, it's now, basically for the next 3 or 4 months, you just have to prepare to be in the heat,
Yeah.
and go from air conditioned room to air conditioned room. But you know how it is.
Yep. Yeah, I'm definitely used to that. But it's been hot the last couple of years, and I don't know. Hopefully, you guys get some monsoons this year. I know last year was pretty dry.
Non-existent. They're non-existent. That's another thing. There's not. Every summer we'd just get storms. And I used to work. I saw this when I used to work for the power company, because every monsoon we'd get a ton of overtime as employees, because I would go out with crews and there'd be power poles down and we'd have to clean up the poles and bring new material out to the field. And I'm talking like miles of poles out here, especially when the infrastructure wasn't as strong, and like in the 90s here, in the late 90s, the monsoons would come down and there'd just be miles of electrical poles down and people would be out of power for a week, Now the infrastructure is really built up because they all blew of decades of them blowing down, So now they put steel poles up, and if you look out here, most like lines you see that run down, the big power lines, you'll see that every several poles are steel. So you see a steel pole because that obviously reinforces the whole line. If you just have a line of wood poles, they're all going down like toothpicks. I mean, you've seen if you don't live here in Arizona, some of the monsoon storms, we get like these microbursts that it's literally like a tornado that comes down and it'll rip a house roof off.
Yeah, for sure.
It literally,
oh no.
My kids' house with their mother, their whole neighborhood got trashed out in Southeast Gilbert. Probably 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Literally roofs got ripped off of homes. It's like, you don't expect stuff like that out here, but it's crazy, man. You can get these little tornado bursts and these huge monsoons, and you've seen like the haboobs or whatever they call them, those big dust storms that the pictures from like helicopters are crazy.
Yeah.
It's just a big dust bowl. But it can get violent here, but the last couple of years, nothing, man. It's weird.
On that note, how's your training going?
Good. It's going good. Yeah. Just trying to be consistent. I'm building myself back up after my back was just tweaked, as you've heard here on the show, for like probably a couple months. And I trained pretty hard last week. I wouldn't say, not 100% or anything. I took rounds off. I was training smart. Let's just say that. But I rolled every day, several times, that I was there. And after that week is a little bit like, because I took a week off and went to California a couple weeks ago and didn't do anything. Didn't train, didn't go to the gym while I was there, just completely relaxed. And literally my back strain was, when I came back, I didn't feel it at all, so I really gave it some time. And then I went back into the gym and started Jiu Jitsu, and after last week, it's a little bit tweaked, but it's going good. It's just one of those things. It takes time with that, and I've just been trying to stretch it out, keep it loose, and so I'm feeling good. But that's only 1 week, a week and a half of training back after. So me, I'm a strong believer, especially as you get older. It's like you got to build that momentum back up. I can't just jump in there, and you end up doing that. You end up like, because you get in roles and you just start going hard, and it's fun. That's what we do. So you really got to kind of be cognizant of that, and that's what I've been trying to do, is just pick and choose my roles and just be smart and not go too hard, because I just haven't been training the last couple months, really. Light stuff. I have students that I'll roll with, especially newer people or white belts or young. We have a couple younger. One of my good friends, George, he brings his sons in the mornings now. So, these kids are 14 and they're younger than 14. So, brand new. So I spent a lot of time during that time when I knew I wasn't rolling with the crew. I would take them aside and do some, one-on-one training during the rolls. So I'm always on the mats every week, but now I'm starting to pick it up a little bit, and just kind of build up, and see where that goes.
That's awesome, man.
It's been my philosophy, been a rough year, knee injury, and I mean it's always like that for me though. I say that, but the last 3-4 years I've had something go on here and there where I've had to dial it back a little bit. But I'd much rather be in that position where I'm always pushing it, and having to dial it back a little bit versus not being motivated. Or I hate not training, so I love it. But I really love it when I'm healthy,
Yeah.
and I can play my game. But the last week I'm just trying to get my cardio back up and stuff. And you know how fast goes. We've been talking about that the other day. It's like sometimes it takes months to build it up, and then like you're off 1 week and it feels like it goes away completely in jiu-jitsu. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, for sure.
So how about you?
Yeah, man, training, things are going awesome,
Nice.
Teaching a couple classes here through the week. Then we've got an open mat. So I think I told you off the podcast maybe a week or so ago that I bought some more mats and I expanded my training area.
Yep.
So I got all that squared away, and I'm basically maxed out on mat space and until I either move to like a fold down desk coming out of the wall or
move your office inside, maybe
move my office or blow out a wall and go further.
Yeah.
But it was nice. We kind of tested it out this last weekend as far as capacity, and we were pretty successful in having 2 groups rolling at the same time. So we had a group of 5 over here over the weekend. So we had 2 groups rolling, and the person that was out is responsible for just if people get too close to each other, just kind of standing in the middle, making sure nobody, like a foot doesn't extend and hurt the group on the other side. And we've got blue belts, purple belts, brown belts here, so most people are pretty savvy with the way that they utilize the space, and they're watching out for everybody. And then with that 5th person off the mat, I feel very confident that we've got a pretty safe training environment. So it's nice having that extra room. So
nice.
We're it's been awesome. Teaching has been fun. Organizing information has been fun, and putting together lesson plans and actually being able to dive into content and curriculum and kind of design it, and spend time in something. I think it's nice for what we're doing here. We talked off the podcast, I think last week too, how much we both enjoyed training in a small group because, we're not, we spent like a month on bottom De La Riva, like we were able to do that. And we went over points of control and what our goals are for these positions, how to do resets, all that type of stuff. We're going to spend another probably 3 or 4 weeks on passing the De La Riva. So it's nice to be able to spend that time and not feel like you have to just rush through a curriculum to get as many techniques and, introducing, you're not introducing conceptual stuff and trying to work on just showing the basics of how to finish a triangle choke or,
right.
So we're able to we're actually able to spend time in a curriculum and really dive deep and put some of the concepts together. So that's been really fun and really nice for me to have to teach it.
Yeah. It's, I like, it's challenging, it's challenging, and it's not easy, to develop curriculum, and because we're both brown belts, but I mean, we've learned a ton of stuff over our career, a ton of stuff, but how much can you recall? How much can you recall to teach? Even the stuff that you think and this could be anybody that's teaching, could be a black belt. Are you really covering all the details? Or do you, I find myself even still doing that sometimes. I'm like, oh, I got all the details here, and I teach a class or something. And even when I think back on it, or I'll look back or think about the lesson, I'm like, oh, I didn't even mention this part that I just took for granted that most people would know this, but when I'm teaching a fundamentals class, I have to like dumb it down all the way, you know? So it really does make you think as an instructor and as a learner. So, and this doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a you know, in air quotes, an instructor somewhere, but let's say you're a purple belt and you're showing a new white belt a move, you know, that's, to me, that's teaching, right? You're teaching someone. You're not a teacher, maybe you're not an instructor, but you're helping out. This happens it happens all the time. That's what we do. We share experiences, right? So if you're an upper belt and you're showing something to someone, always remember that is they might not have the same experience and base knowledge that you do. So sometimes you have to really take it all the way back. Where's the position of the knee? You know, something that you might not, you know, and you see the greatest instructors do this. And that's where I'm really learning a lot from watching a lot of videos and, you know, like a Danaher or something where it's like every aspect is covered. You know, it's just almost to where you're like, oh my God, there's just so much here, you know?
Yeah.
But that's really important because people learn differently. They pick up on different things, and really to have true deep knowledge in jiu-jitsu, you need to know those things, you know? You don't want to have this artificial or let's say a thin layer of knowledge on different aspects. You know, you want to have a deep layer of knowledge. And you talk about, like, I'm impressed of like the little training group that you've created, and it's awesome, man. It's like you're starting to put together plans and teach people stuff, and I know they've shared they've shared feedback with you, and they're really enjoying the extended learning, like you said. I mean, I think that I like that too. And especially if you can control it where you're like working on one thing for a long time. That stuff tends to stick more with me. I think it's just natural. If you're going to really drill it for a few weeks, it's going to stick. But like we talked about this on the podcast before. Are you a student under that plan, and are you going one time a week? Or, you know, if you're doing 4 days a week in Wes's garage for 3 weeks on the De La Riva, you're going to remember a lot of that. You know, you're pounding it into your mind. And I try to do that when we set up some of our training too, is go at least a couple weeks of, and not like, because, you know, you could do 3 weeks on De La Riva and your 3 weeks is different than mine. And it's not going to cover everything in 3 weeks.
For
so
sure.
You have to pick certain aspects of that lesson or that guard that you're teaching. And it might not be, you know, Dave over there in the corner might know. He might be a black belt. You guys are both black belts, and maybe his idea of what to do in De La Riva is totally different than you. But that's the beauty of jiu-jitsu. We learn from each other. You know, it's obviously you recall and learn. And I teach a lot of stuff that my professors have taught me, but also I show a lot of stuff that I've incorporated from other professors, whether it be online or my friends or even training partners. You know, I learn a lot from everyone. So I say that because I was on social media yesterday and I saw this. I'm not even going to go into the details, but it was a completely unrelated. It was a jiu-jitsu post, and I was looking at the comments because it was kind of, I don't even know if it was a Gordon Ryan post or something. It was definitely something where I wanted to see what people were saying. Because number one, we have a jiu-jitsu podcast, so I like to see what people are saying about everything. You have to kind of be in the know. I have a jiu-jitsu apparel company, so if people are talking apparel, I'm in the comments. I'm in there. I'm looking to see what people like, what they don't like about certain brands. That's just what I do. So in this particular instance, this guy was having a back and forth with someone, and it was just stupid. It was actually, I won't say what it was about because I don't want to track this back. I don't even know who this person is, but I believe it was somewhere here in the Arizona. But the guy, I clicked on his profile just because he was like going back. It was basically a guy that was going back and forth and arguing with someone. I'm just like, who's this know-it-all? It was like this guy who just was such a know-it-all. And it wasn't really like, he wasn't even really saying the right thing. So I was just one of those things where you click on, I'm like, I got to see who this is, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I look at this guy's profile. He maybe has 100 and something followers. He's not like a big name. He's a white belt, okay? I see this guy, he's a white belt. And his very most recent video is an instructional.
No.
Yeah. And I click on it and I was like, is this guy the instructor? But he wasn't. He was the guy helping the instructor, the uke, or whatever they call these guys. So he's on bottom, and the other guy was actually showing how to... He had this other guy in closed guard, and the guy that was teaching was inside the closed guard. He was a 4-stripe white belt. The other guy.
4-stripe.
Yeah. And it was like a professional... Like they were in some kind of training room. This is my point, is that not everybody... These guys that are training with you, I know their experience at their gym... I won't get too much into it, but they're learning a lot from you, let's say. You've had a lot of experience. You've had different instructors. You've been all, you're the last 2 instructors you've been under are legends. Okay.
Yeah.
So to have these guys learn from you, they're very fortunate. So I'm just going to tell you that and you got to be proud of that, because you have knowledge now over so many years that you can share with people. And quite frankly, you can sell it if you wanted to. That's it. Across the board, if you have knowledge in something, whether it's, name it, you're an artist, you're a computer programmer, if you have skills, those are relatable and you can make a career out of them, or at least people will pay you to educate them in those things. So that's something to be proud of, because I kind of looked at this video. First of all, I was kind of set aback. I was like, why is this? It was almost like they were making a BJJ Fanatics video. I'm like, these guys are way too serious. Like, and here's the thing, that it was completely bad technique, And this guy's here showing it. These guys are showing it like, I don't know if they didn't have it. So part of what it was in there is it says, hey, our BJJ club is growing. That's what I saw, one of the comments or something. And literally this guy didn't have any, he maybe had 3 likes. So I was just like, okay, here's a guy. It was just interesting. Here's a guy that maybe they have this little BJJ club, in their garage set up, but he's learning from this like 3 or 4-stripe white belt who's teaching him bad from one of the most basic positions inside the closed guard, like a bad escape.
Yeah.
Like literally the guy was like, oh, you got to put your head down. Just, yeah, inside closed guard. It was crazy, man. And I just... That immediately came up as like, small group training is good, but, and like we mentioned downToroll.com on the podcast, you've been involved with that. You got to still have quality instruction. Yeah. You got to figure out a way. Yes. You got to have people that know what they're doing, or you're really just wasting your time, or spinning your wheels, Yeah. So, I think you got to recognize that, though. I mean, you got to recognize that. A lot of that, I think, is ego, too. This other white belt probably learned some stuff, and he wanted to show it, but it's like, it's not time for professional videos yet, buddy. I mean, it's not that easy. And you don't want to open yourself up to that criticism. Here I am, some stranger. I just see it. I'm like, oh, my gosh, this is not real good for that training group. It's like not good technique. Maybe if it was some really good stuff, because you could be a year or 2 white belt and maybe one thing really good, and you can mimic what your professor does, right?
For sure.
We've all done that. I mean, that's how you learn.
Yeah, for sure.
Some of the things I teach specifically how I was taught, very, very specifically. Like I remember learning those things. So that's what we do. But my point is right away I noticed, I'm like, okay, here's maybe the little bit of a downside from small group small group training is like, and we talked about this before in the podcast, where you might not have access to a lot of live experience, let's say, live people, because even these guys they could have been somewhere where they don't have a gym around them. They might be learning on YouTube, and there's a lot of stuff out there on YouTube. But you know as well as I do, you have to be on the mat, and sometimes you need that skilled person right there with you, placing your hand on the collar, showing you physically what's going on here, you know? Because even if you're learning online, you could be hey, I got this hour-long YouTube. I'm learning this stuff. Where you could even be playing the video while you're training, right? And you can pause it. But what happens if you have a question, you know, or you don't understand that part? That instructor, that video just moved right on by. They keep going, and here you are left with maybe not the correct, you know. So
totally,
it made me really feel fortunate for my experience, but also I went and found that experience. You know, I was smart enough to know, hey, I'm not going to be able, because even when I started, I knew a couple guys that were doing small group training because there wasn't a ton of gyms out here. And I knew somebody that kind of invited me to train. And I was just like, if I'm going to do this, I need to go to somebody that's knows what they're doing, you know? It's like, anyway, that was just an interesting thing. It just does show those jiu-jitsu is really blowing up, where you have white belts teaching white belts on making videos and stuff. And, you know, like I said before, if it's legit, that's one thing. But, and we've talked about this before in the podcast, if you're that blue belt that likes to help lower belts, make sure you're doing due diligence and teaching the right thing, or make it basic enough that everyone's understanding, you know. It's not rocket science, but there's a lot to jiu-jitsu. This goes back to the whole point of how do you pick and choose what you're teaching or what you're learning. So that's something we wanted to talk about, was the organization of learning, or the organization of your approach to learning jiu-jitsu, let's say. And I think it's a real interesting topic, because we could probably, you and I could poll different coaches, different instructors, gym owners. We could even poll the guys, the gentlemen that we've had on as guests. Yeah. All of them have taught before, or are currently teaching. How do they approach like the breadth of jiu-jitsu, and like, how do you tackle? There's so much to tackle, right? So I wanted to ask you what your opinion was on that. I have some approaches that I've been following for years, and I can actually throw out some names that I really like in this space of jiu-jitsu, the conceptual approach to how to train. So what is I know we've talked about this before, and I know you really do focus on some of those things, but like when you're showing the De La Riva back and forth, or whatever it might be, points of control, you've mentioned that. What is your approach to teaching, even if it's just a position, or how do you foresee yourself? Let's say a new white belt comes in, brand new, I'm in the training group. Mm-hmm. You know, you can't really stop everyone else's progress to just dump, you know, everything has to be focused on this one person that doesn't even know how to pull guard or whatever. So that can be the challenge, is how do you like get them on the train of learning, but also not leaving other people behind. But let's say it is just a new person. What do you do? You know, I mean, it's a difficult question. It's like, where do you start? There's so much to learn. There's so much to learn. For sure.
I think I'm fortunate in my situation where I've got everyone in here is a blue belt or higher. So that is an automatic advantage right there. Just, you know, I don't have to worry about, I'm not so much concerned about teaching a triangle choke.
Yeah.
You know, I think with a new person, if it's a day one person, you know, that basic type of stuff, that, you know, it has to fit somewhere in a curriculum. So I don't know, you know, maybe what I've seen in the past, and I would be something that I would probably employ, is I've seen, and I guess now that I've got a little bit more space, I have a little bit more ability to probably do something like this. But what I've seen in the past is more. I've seen basically a mat get split. So he will teach a fundamental technique. Maybe it's the same stuff or similar things. Maybe I'm teaching a triangle choke, but I'm teaching, a series of moves to my advanced students that lead to a triangle choke.
Mm-hmm.
So you teach the triangle choke, you have your beginners, and this is probably what I would do is I would have a newer, if it's a day one person, I would split them off onto the side of the mat and have them you're just going to focus on this.
Yeah.
And then I would have another group of students that I'd get the beginner going, watch them do it a couple times, and then I would teach the other series, let them do it, knowing that I can kind of watch how they're doing it at the same time as watching the beginner. And then I would really try and get the new person try and spun up on some of those finer details. That's how I've seen it done in the past at a couple other gyms where they would split new people off if they're just working on very fundamental things.
Yeah.
And then he would teach advanced students, and then he would kind of monitor how things are going and make adjustments where he needs to.
That makes sense.
It's tricky though, for sure, because you can't stick a day one white belt in and say, yeah, we're gonna do a De La Riva reset going into some sort of sweep, whatever. It's over the person's head.
Yeah.
So,
you probably run into that more with small group training and small academy training, where at our gym, it's a big enough gym where there's fundamental classes. Mm-hmm. So you can very specifically take beginner courses, and there's enough students and there's instructors in there where you can control all that. But it's when you get into a mixed levels, or obviously if you just have one, you might have just gi jiu-jitsu or no gi jiu-jitsu at your gym, your academy, then you're going to get everyone from a white belt to a black belt, and they have different needs as students, right? So that can be a challenge, I think also for that's kind of on the instructor, but you as a learner in jiu-jitsu, I kind of wanted to talk about this is like, what is your approach? Not you, but listeners out there. What's your approach to learning? How are you taking the information in and storing it? Let's say, what files are you putting it in?
Yeah.
What's your file system look like? Is it sloppy and there's shit everywhere? Because I've been like that too.
Totally.
So. It's like I'm taking all this information in. I'm not really packaging it. And absolutely, when I was new, I did that all the time, because I didn't know. You're just taking as much information in as you can. But the sooner you can kind of maybe have more of a focused approach on how you're retaining that information, the better off you are. But that does take, we've talked about that ad nauseum here. It does take extra time. It takes, we talked about that even with Patrick on the last episode. It's like some people are lazy. They don't want to take the extra effort, whether it's external training or even gathering your thoughts or taking notes, or like for what he said is like mind mapping, that type of thing. I've talked about jiu-jitsu maps before. Like, that's kind of like the way I see. So one of the guys I like to follow on social media is probably one of my favorite follows is John Thomas BJJ. So he's just such a great. He has a great conceptual idea of how to study and learn jiu-jitsu. So I've been following this guy for years. I really believe in a lot of how his approach to how to learn jiu-jitsu. Right away when I first started, well, I had the same approach. Here, the way I look at jiu-jitsu is, and this is just the way I always saw, even as a white and blue belt, is you have all of these different positions, right? Or let's say guard positions. Let's say positions, because it could be a guard, it could be a top game, it could be on the feet, standing, it could be on your knees, right when you're bumping fists. That literally, so there's all these little windows, and I've always thought like, okay, I have half guard, I have top half, I have whatever it is, passing de la Hiva, like to your point, de la Hiva, and then the flip side, passing the de la Hiva. I always see these positions, and in my mind, I was always like, okay, I got to develop all of these, and then I can start understanding and how to connect them, right? That's basic stuff. Like, that should be a no-brainer. But that's very difficult to do. Yeah. And to John's point is that takes many years to do, right? And this is what I've talked about before with Jiu-Jitsu maps is like, that's why it's important to at least know those positions or know what you're strong in and what you need to work on so that you can identify when you're in a position and what that position is good for, or how much do you know in that position, and can I transition out to something else? Okay, so let me try to remember. I have maybe I'll link it, but John Thomas has a great video out there, and it's basically on this exact point. And his point is he looks at all the different positions as mini games, and I think he uses that term, mini games, and I love this explanation. So let's say the first mini game is like you're standing. So you have a game and both of you know what you need to do, right? You're either going to take them down or pull guard. Something's going to happen there. It's not really going to be a ton of submissions from that position. So you have to identify first. And that can be one training aspect. And that is, right? People work stand up, you work it back and forth, you can pull guard on some day, that should be a part of your training. Then let's say you pull an open guard, or let's say you pull into like a leg lasso or something. Now you're in this other mini game. And so do you have in that game, what is, basically his idea is that from every little position, you should, let's say every guard, you should either be able to sweep, submit, or transition to something else. And it's true. He just puts this guidance into a way that you can really understand it, but this is what we're doing. We're not doing this just to sit there all day. Sometimes we stall, and he has a point for that too. He's got a lot of cool thoughts on jiu-jitsu, but the point is that the more you go through time, the more you set up these little positions, and we all do this already. If you're a closed guard player, you get somebody in your closed guard during training, you know what your strengths are if you've been training a while.
Yeah.
You know what sweep might work, what submissions might work, and do you develop a transition to something else? And that's his point, is you need to be able to do that. Now, if you're like a blue belt, you might only have a couple of these mini games mastered. So you might have a closed guard game, and you might have, maybe you like to pass and go to flat half or something, and you might, or a top half player, pressure passer or something. Maybe you have that down. There's a lot of these in jiu-jitsu. So his point is you should master each one so that you have a sweep, a submission, and a transition to something else. But he's not necessarily saying that every time in your unclosed guard you should transition to this. He doesn't look at it like a path where I'm in closed guard, I'm going to sweep, to mount, to bust, to this. No, he just have those three aspects down. Submit, sweep, or transition from every position. So then if you get in trouble, then, let's say, and his point is like, let's just take closed guard. Closed guard is a very strong guard for attacks and submissions. It's a strong guard. You know, it's not the greatest guard for sweeps, someone's on their knees, they can really base, as you know. It's a flower sweep isn't always super easy. Like you have to do stuff to set that up, you know. And then it can be a good stalling position. So he also talks a lot about where, especially if you're a competitor, you might be going through match after match after match. You need to be able to get to a position where you can stall a little bit, because not all guards are stalling guards, as you know. Some guards, if you start stopping, someone's going to immediately take advantage of you stopping. Some guards, you have to be more active. So very cool concepts, you know. So over time, you develop, you're playing, if you look at your training that way, you can start focusing on what needs to be done. So he's basically saying, let's say someone puts you in a position where you're playing a guard that maybe you're not familiar with. Maybe you get into a single leg X or something. And that's your mini game. You have to realize that's my game now. And we do. We realize, you know, if you've been training long enough, I'm in single leg X, and you try to recall what do I know from here? Or am I just sitting there? You know, what do I do? If you get passed right away, then that should be or let's say you're in a tournament, and obviously in a tournament it's going to really stick in your mind. But if you get passed or taken advantage of in that position, he's like, that's what you need to work on, you know. And he comes all the way back for this, and I really believe in this too, is you're doing yourself a disservice if you just play one single guard forever or whatever. You should never be the person that says, I'm a De La Riva player. He doesn't like that. And I agree, because why put yourself in that box? You know, don't you want to be great? The greatest people, and I think he uses the example of like Lucas Lepre plays like, if you ever watch that guy compete, he's like, every guard is like the shit, you know? I mean, he's a master at that stuff.
He is amazing. Now,
I'm not saying like if you're some high level competitor that this is your game, that you shouldn't go to that every time. But as a jiu-jitsu, you know, life learner, and you want to be well-rounded, you should start working on other aspects of your game. You always have that comfortable spot to go back to, and that's his point. That one you've conquered, that mini game, you know. Let's move on and develop other ones. And there's so many. And his point is everyone is a mini game. You know, it's like we're on our knees starting. If let's say you're not standing and starting the round, or let's say you submit or you get submitted during the round. You know, sometimes you don't just stand up and start going again right from the feet. Sometimes you just slap, fist bump, and go from the ground or whatever. You know, you submitted me, let's go from here. That's a game in itself. Are you going to get grips first? It's the grip fighting game. Okay, you lost grip, or I got this grip. Here's another aspect of the game until you get into a guard. So it's really cool stuff. We'll post it in one of our social media. We'll tag John Thomas, and we'll post it for you, because I really love his YouTube page. I study that guy a lot, and he has great jiu-jitsu already, but I love the way he approaches learning more than anything, because he just really packages it nicely, and it makes so much sense. And it really is what most instructors are trying that anyway, or trying to relay the information. You don't want to, if you're in a decent school, you're probably not every day learning something new, because that kind of goes to Patrick's point of sometimes the instructors where he came from, they would just teach whatever came to mind that day. And there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't make it for the best learning experience if you're just all over the place, right? But as a student, you don't really have control of what you're learning or what your instructor is going to teach. So you have to really take some of that on yourself. So if you see a weakness in your game, and let's break it down to like even the guard game, because he has another great video on guard and how what he believes with playing guard, and it's like his whole thing is like just develop like 3 to start. And I'm talking to people starting out, and this goes back to how are you going to learn? Like when I first asked you, how are you going to teach a new person? This could go for them. As a teacher, you could say, I want you to learn 3 basic guards. It's going to take a while to do that, but it makes it more palatable than I got to learn everything. I got to learn all these guards. It's just so much. And I remember when I was new, I was like, I literally didn't even know what the guard names were or what they were, right? I mean, when you first start, it's like, what's reverse de la Riva? You know, I didn't know that. I didn't know what that was,
sure.
you know? And so his point is like, as you're going through your journey, and that's what this podcast is all about. So that's why I think it's really applicable here is like, take, you know, let's say you like the half guard with the underhook or something. We know we're good at that. Let's develop a couple other guards, okay? So you're going to develop, and he also says, you know, you got to develop guard retention on every guard. So guard retention comes first.
Yeah.
That comes first. Then you're going to set up whether you're attacking, sweeping, or let's say resting is what he says. Because those are the three things you do when you're in guard. Mm-hmm. You really do. There's going to be times when you need to rest and you're just like, maybe some stud wrestler, blue belts coming at your ass, and he's just like, you know, and you literally, you know, you have to have time to stall. So you need to get into a guard that you can rest. Maybe a closed guard or something where you just close them up, you know. He likes sit-up guard. Like, he likes single leg sit-up, John Thomas. That's one of his games. But he's like, it's not a great submission guard, but it's an amazing sweeping guard. Yeah,
and it's really good for entries. You can enter into a lot of different places from there.
So once you start recognizing those things, so if you're newer and you don't have a lot of guard experience, you know, just start developing one, then move to another one. Then you can start transitioning and learning the transitions between those. Okay. Mm-hmm. Then you can move on. That might take 6 months. It might take 2 years. It just depends on the person. But you have to have something that you're focusing on. And the point is that you as the learner need to focus on that. You know, it can't be, and we've said this before, it can't just, our experiences are unique. The instructor, the academy owner, the black belt is only going to put out information. And they can help you with this type of stuff, but everyone's their own person. People have responsibilities for many, many students. So you have to take it upon yourself to understand these concepts. And this is a great one, is like developing these 3 guards, knowing an attack, a sweep, and a rest, what they're good for, understanding what guards are good for. This is stuff that I've, in the last couple of years, is just coming to me, like really deeply understanding, like, oh, that makes so much sense. Like, that guard, it's not good for that. Like, why am I always trying that? You know, or if I need a safe guard, I shouldn't be playing this card. I need to do something else or get into a different position, right? So, you know, he says the 3 guards, don't get caught up in the one guard, because of this point exactly, every guard has its purpose. Yeah. Like a spider guard, if you're a spider guard player, you're great at attacking, throwing triangles, omoplatas, like, but it's not the greatest stalling guard, really.
No, you got to be active.
You know, so that's his point. It's not the best sweeping guard either, spider guard, because you're extended out, the other, now if they're maybe on their knees, it's a little bit different. I'm not saying there's no sweeps from there. Obviously, you can off-balance somebody very nicely, but his point is, and if I recall, this is great too. He's like, let's say you're a spider guard player and you play, I think he even used the term spider guard. I watched this one a couple weeks ago, but if you're a spider guard player and you're a level 9 spider guard player, but the person that you're going against, let's say in a tournament, that guy rolls with 10. He's always rolling with spider guard people, and he's a 10 spider guard passer. Mm-hmm. So his 10 is going to beat your 9. So and maybe your De La Riva is an 8, and his De La Riva passing is only a 4.
Yeah.
So those are the things you have to recognize, and it's a really cool way to look at jiu-jitsu, and it's very, very applicable and meaningful, you know. And if you start looking at things in those terms, now, it's not easy to look at things takes a deep understanding of jiu-jitsu and time on the mat, right? He can say these things because I think he's been training jiu-jitsu for 17 years or something, and he's not an older guy. Yeah, been training almost a lot of his life, so pretty decorated and an amazing instructor. So great advice, you know. and keep an open mind. I think his last thing I made a note was keep an open mind on training other guards. You know, you gotta like, you might feel uncomfortable, but you have to spend, and I think he even says like the same thing with you, weeks or a month. And that means like you have to do it in your roles. You have to get out there and put yourself in that position every time, or drill on the side with your pal. I want to just be put in, I want single leg, let's go to X guard. I keep getting my X guard passed. I need to figure out something here. I'm going to play it until I get good at it. And that's how you will get good. And that's how we've all gotten good. We just don't know it.
Yeah.
The things that you think you're good at in jiu-jitsu, it's because you spend a lot of time doing them, obviously. So step outside the box and get good at some other things. Then you can start really seeing a bigger picture, and maybe not mapping things all the way through, like I said, like he said, but when you find yourself in a position, you're familiar with that mini game.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, you know, teaching is something that like I like to teach, just in this context of jiu-jitsu, and we're talking about De La Riva just because it's fresh on my mind, and we've been hammering it the past month or so. You know, and I'm presenting it, you know, the techniques are the techniques, but the way that I think about the information, and this is what I was telling somebody recently, is, you know, I have the points of control. These points of control are for a specific goal. So when you're in De La Riva, I mean, it's a strong guard, but it's one of the ones you have to be active in. You need to be attacking the person's base. You need to be off balancing them, and that's one of the goals. So these points of control, you know, you have to know what they are, and you have to be attacking the far leg, kicking the person out, so that you can address the posture. Right? It's a postural game, so you know, you have certain goals that each person is trying to do, and so I'm trying to, you know, with this collar grip or this sleeve grip, I'm trying to break this person's posture, get them nice and spread out. Maybe you're transitioning to deep De La Riva X, or maybe you're going to X guard, single leg X, maybe you're sweeping, but you have to have the big picture. The techniques are just the different pathways that you're getting to these different places, you know. And if you lose sight of the big picture of, I'm trying to move on, but he's now broke my De La Riva hook and the ankle grip or the pant grip. So like I can't move on because I lost 2 out of the 3 points of control. I've got to, you know, so your decision tree has to kind of look like, I have to have these 3 points, and I need to be attacking the person's base so that I can advance, right? You know, or go to something else. Yeah. You know, when I lose the collar grip, maybe I'm gonna grab a sleeve grip, or I'm gonna grab a cross collar grip, or I'm gonna just completely transition out to single leg X. So you have to the big picture, I guess, and that's kind of what I try and am putting. The way I'm trying to present the information is, and when we transitioned to passing the De La Riva, it was the same thing. It was like, look, these are all the same points of control. He has a De La Riva hook. He's got my pants or my ankle, and he's got a collar or a sleeve. You know, so it's just that the goals are different from the top players. So
you got to remove them.
I have to address first thing I want to address is the posture, because if my posture's broken, he can pull me over the top. Yep. He can sweep, he can, you know, whatever. So you got to address this. Then you're going to address these next sequential things so that you can either pass the guard, crowd the hips, or I'm going to pass from the outside. So, you know, whatever that kind of looks like, but you still have to know, like, the big picture stuff is way more important than getting lost in the weeds. And I think that's where a lot of teachers, it's something that I try and I'm pretty aware of, I think, but you know, being a new instructor, I'm trying to really hard not to make sure I don't get lost in the details. You know, you can completely lose somebody you can totally overteach things.
Yeah.
I've seen people just completely overteach it where, I mean, it's like you've got a white or a new blue belt and you're going down to every detail, and it's something that they have never seen before.
Right.
So it's a trade-off. Yeah, you want your technique to look clean, but at the same time, this is the first time somebody is seeing it, first time they're practicing. It's not going to look pretty.
Yeah.
So it's like a trade-off to where if I overteach this concept or I overteach all these different techniques, they're not going to get any of it because it's too much.
Yeah.
So you have to, I think that it's good to keep it basic, but also look at the higher approach of, listen, if you've got these 3 grips and you're controlling the posture on bottom, here's a couple of techniques that we're going over for the day to get you into a sweep or whatever. And then from top, look, if this guy's got your posture, you gotta bust that sleeve grip so that you can move on. Yeah. And then here's a couple of techniques that, the techniques are, you're going to see a million different ways to pass De La Riva, and some of them are going to work for the person, some of them are not. Everybody's going to learn different things. That's why I think you have to see, when you've been doing this for 10, 12, 15 years or even longer, you've just seen so many techniques. You grab onto the things that work for you, but you still, you still have to see, the newer player still has to see all of these different techniques.
For sure.
So you have to see the high road, and then, we're going to get a couple techniques that can help get you there.
Yeah.
And over time, you're going to see, and so much that your game is going to develop based on the things that you're really good at. But, that's how I'm like trying to present.
Yeah, that's good.
The concepts.
That's what you have to do, because there's so much. There's just so much, it's like.
There's so much.
I think both for what we said today, it's like you got the bigger picture, you have your different positions. That's kind of a game within a game, right? The whole big picture is Jiu Jitsu, and then you dive down into the stand-up. What are your options there? Into the different guards. And once you get into the guard, like the De La Riva, then you have the different techniques within the guard. And some of those techniques are sweeping, some are submitting, some are stalling, to be quite frank. It's like there's so much to learn that I think that we can't profess that enough, is like you have to take time to somehow gather that information on your own and come up with a plan. And it is mind mapping. It's a mental approach to how you're retaining information, because you're going to get a lot thrown at you. I do a couple things, like when I'm coaching, just to try to help that out, is like maybe I'm showing a specific something specific within a guard, but I always try to, like, if we have time, I'll step it back and step it forward before and after we get to that position, so that it's like, how did you get to whatever it is? Like, let's say you're in like side control. How did you get to side control? So, or let's say the lesson is on side control attacks, or side control. Let's say the lesson is on side control. Let's dumb it down all the way back. Yeah. What are the positions in side control, right? It's not just one. You can have your hips one way. You can have your hips the other way. You can have cross face. You can have your arm over their head, and you can be facing their lower half. There's a lot of different positions to hold people. Some might be better to transition in north-south. Some might be better to pressure from side control, maybe to go to knee on belly or something. So you have that. Let's say that's the technique of the day, and this is applicable. This is something I actually showed recently, is those different positions, how to position your body in side control. That might be something that, the fun stuff is all the other stuff, but to get basics, if you're teaching someone like a fundamental, it's like, how do you hold somebody down in side control? If you don't know, and you put both your arms on one side of the person's body, one or the other, you're going to get swept. But if you don't know that, you don't know. You have to have, your arm positioning, you're blocking the hips, your head control. You can imagine, I'm sure you're imagining different scenarios as side control. Mm-hmm. My point is if that's the lesson, I always try to just a little bit show something on the front end and the back. So how did we get to side control? So it could just be a real quick half guard pass. Maybe we don't do deep lesson on that, or maybe I do something small, or just show it. Then we're in side control, and then maybe to finish it up, where maybe we weren't going to work on too many attacks, I'll show an attack from side control. So it's extending that lesson out a little bit, and because if everything's in a window, I'm just learning this one thing, the Ezekiel choke. Yeah. How did the person get to that position?
That's you
have to have so much knowledge to get to do that. So I can see those pathways, as so can you.
Yeah.
But not everybody can. So I always try to teach a pathway into it and out of it, or vice versa, or whatever it is. If you understand what I'm saying, I always try to put some information on the front end and the back end, so that it's here's how you get here, guys. Okay, to start the lesson of the day. So that takes time, though. It takes
for
time.
Sure. And in the beginning, people want to. Man, I want to learn this.
Yeah.
I want to learn this arm bar. I want to learn this triangle, and it's man. I mean, I can show you I can show you that.
Right.
I can totally show you this triangle. I can totally show you this Kimura. I can totally show you this. But what you're not seeing, what the person may not be seeing, or not you or anybody in particular, but what a person who's saying this is probably not seeing, is there were so many steps that led up to that finish.
Yeah.
You don't the finish doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
The finish is just
the finish could be totally dependent on how you set it up, So.
Totally. And so it's all it's all of the steps that lead up to, that's just the end.
Yeah.
It's just the end. And the end is, the part that people want to learn and they think is super cool. And I think with time and experience, you learn that it's actually all of those little bitty things that happened along the way. That's the cool part, and the end is just the natural progression of having somebody completely locked up, and they're just checkmated. You can't. There's nowhere else to go besides that.
Yep.
There's no more room. There's no more space. There's no more outs. That's just the natural end to all of these other steps.
Yep.
That's the fun part. I love that part.
Yeah. Checkmate.
Yeah.
On that note, covered a lot.
I hope I guess if I were to end on one thing, and this is kind of circle back, and then we'll kind of wrap it up. But this will kind of circle back to what we were talking about in the beginning: is how to organize all this information and the mapping component. If you're somebody and then you're wanting to start a training journal, it can be yours. My suggestion would be to have it as get the big picture, the key points, and keep it simple, because you won't use the training journal if it takes you 20 or 30 minutes out of your day to fill out all the information. You're not going to use it. It's too much time and it's too much information. It really needs to be succinct. It should take no more than 5 or 10 minutes to fill out and to write something down. You're just looking at big picture points and maybe a few goals for each position and how to get to the next. And I use a lot of arrows. So it's I'm here, I draw an arrow, maybe I draw 3 arrows to what we've kind of talked about today. You could do a position, you have 3 arrows. One is a transition, one is a sweep, one is
submission.
A submission.
Yeah.
And you can map that out however you want. And so then when you start putting it all together, you should be able to go back. Maybe you're 6 months down the road, you're wanting to review some De La Riva, or you're wanting to review some bottom side control. You've got, boom, this, I've got, here are my transitions. You flip to another page on each one of those, and now you start to connect the dots on where you're at, what you're doing at every exact moment.
Yeah, that's great advice. You can do it on the front, you can do it from the top and the bottom, you know?
Yeah.
Here's my top position. What's my submission? What's my pass? What's my stall? I mean, you can look at it that way. What's a safe position? And I think over time, if you take these notes and you start realizing maybe after 6 months, a year, maybe you have a lot of notes on closed guard. Mm-hmm. And you're really feeling your development. It's a good way to look back and validate maybe how you're feeling about your training. You know, I feel like I'm strong on closed guard. Look back on your notes. Have you trained a lot of closed guard? Are you making a lot of those connections and those arrows? You know, is it solid? And if that's the case, that's fine. It's time to move on and learn something new. Doesn't mean you're abandoning that at all. Your instructor might teach that in another 2 months and you can add to it, but we have to develop other aspects of the game because ultimately you don't know where your opponent's ever going to take you. So they might take you to a place that you're unfamiliar with, and it might be their A game. So that's why it's important to, if that happens, going back to what I said, maybe if you have the 3 guards that, let's say you're at the 3 guard level, you're comfortable with 3 guards. Maybe you know a little bit about other ones, but those 3, guess what? You're going to find ways to get back to one of those 3 guards. And if you have like 3, and it just makes so much sense. If you have like 3 strong guards, like what John Thomas was saying, where you can sweep, submit, or rest. I mean, and I'm saying they're strong. Exactly. That's good. Like, I'm still doing that. I'm still trying to develop all my guards. Some of them are weak as shit. Admittedly, I just don't play a lot, some of them. But I do try to get into those positions more and more because I know stuff that I can get into and I can lock someone down. I mean, that's just, I've been doing this a long time. But that doesn't do anything for me. I mean, sometimes maybe I just want to get into that position and work stuff from there. But I'm always trying to step outside the box. And that's going to mean you're probably going to have to take some hits in training. You're going to get passed. You're going to have some ego checks, I mean, quite frankly. But you're going to develop and grow from that, and really develop more guards. Because if you get to a level of some high-level guard players, you literally can't do anything to them. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's frustrating.
For sure.
So also, if you're a one guard player, you got to switch it up because guess what? Your training partners, people are going to start recognizing the guard you play. This has happened to me, and they know your tricks, and you better have something else for it because they're either going to not let you get to that guard, or they're going to learn how to pass it eventually, or give you problems with it. So vary it up. So all these things we've been talking about, it all makes sense. It's like first you have to kind of visualize some of the concepts we're talking about. It's really just focused thought on different aspects of your game and really work on it, and take notes, make a journal, or make obviously mind mapping is great, but my concept of jiu-jitsu maps is doing the same thing we're talking about and literally putting it down on a notepad, but I would make like a flow chart.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
The flow charts never connect really because you never know where you're going to be taken, but that's how come I relate what John Thomas was saying so much is because I have that same approach to jiu-jitsu and it's the same thing you just said. De la Hiva, these are my arrows. This is what I can do from there. But you can't just have that one aspect on your chart or on your notepad.
Yeah.
Because you might not always be there. So start developing those clusters and look at your training as like a game within a game. Try not to get lost in everything, but every position you're in is in a game. And that's really what the best people do. This is where I'm at. It's my guard against his passing. This is it. I'm going to put and that's where you have to have the skills. And that's where it gets down to that deep level of the points of control. And that's like the deepest level, right? So
that gets deep.
Your instructors will teach you the points of control, and your coaches for you as listeners and people training, including myself, we have to kind of put these things conceptually how I'm going to learn jiu-jitsu, how am I going to organize my learning. So hopefully we had some good takeaway today. If you guys have any comments, throw them, send us a DM, or Wes posts. We have posts go out all week long. Comment on some of our posts. I'm sure he'll be capturing some of what we talked about. Guys and gals, give us a share. If you guys see some of those, share them in your Instagram stories. I mean, it's like a direct. We see like direct followers from when people share. We get a couple followers because people just don't know that we're out there. There's a million podcasts at this point. I mean, literally, I think there's like millions of podcasts out there now. So, or millions of hours of podcasts created every week. So it's like, and there's a lot of jiu-jitsu content out there too. So if you like what we're doing, share it, obviously you guys are subscribing if you're listening right now, but share some of our social media, maybe tell somebody about it. We've gained a lot of followers that way. We don't have a lot, but we do have a lot of, we have a lot of loyal followers. Let's just say that. So, and we've gotten some great feedback. So share our content we're putting out. We're going to get some more guests on. Guys, check out, since I mentioned him so much, John Thomas, BJJ on social media. We'll put in one of the clips. We'll make a little link to his Instagram on one of our clips this week, and we'll set that up because I think he shares some really great insight. There's a lot of technique video out there, guys and gals, but there's not so much on organizing your training. So when I see stuff like that, he's not the only one that does that. There's other people that put that out there on what methods you can do to better learn jiu-jitsu. That type of stuff is on us, not on your coaches. So as people learning, we have to develop those things. So we'll try to share some more stuff throughout the week with that. And if you have anything else, let us know. Otherwise, Wes, great talking to you today.
Yeah, you too, man. We'll catch everybody up next week.
All right, guys. Have a great week and safe training.